We all face conversations that test us, with people we don't understand, people we think are nothing like us. But what if that's not true? What if we're actually closer than we think? What if I told you you're probably connected to royalty, to warriors, to people who shaped history, and also to the stranger you passed in the grocery store today? Stay with me. This might change how you see everyone.
Hey, Steffi K, got something to say. Talk that listens, clears the way. Truth on the mic, grounded in change. You sticking with that? Oh yeah, we sticking with that. Laugh it out, talk it through, we ain't looking back.
Some chats ain't easy, but we take it slow. Tough stuff tackled, now watch us glow.
Sticking with it. Yeah, we sticking with that.
All right, let's break that down. There's this game called 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. Have you heard of it? It actually started back in the 90s. A group of college kids noticed how often he showed up in movies and turned it into a game. And somehow, it stuck. The idea is simple. Every actor can be connected to Kevin Bacon in 6 steps or less. So it goes like this. Actor A worked with actor B, who worked with actor C, and eventually you land back at Kevin Bacon. 6 people, 6 connections. And weirdly enough, it almost always works. But here's the thing. That idea, it didn't start with Kevin Bacon. It started with people. There's something called 6 degrees of separation. The idea that any 2 people on this planet are connected by 6 relationships or less. Not actors, not celebrities, us. You, me, everyone. 6 people, 6 connections. And the crazy part is, that means the person you don't understand, the one you disagree with, the one you've written off, you're not as far from them as you think. So now, it's not just some fun little game. It's something we're actually living. It's a reminder the distance isn't as big as we make it. And if that's true, then maybe the gap between us was never about distance at all. Maybe it's about what we've already decided, what we're unwilling to hear, and the conversations we avoid. So let me ask you, what would happen if we actually had those conversations? Because maybe it's not 6 degrees of separation. Maybe it's 6 degrees closer. This episode came about because I was talking to my cousin not too long ago, and she's been deep into our family history, like deep. And she asked me, what have you heard about where we come from? And I said, wait, do you mean the part where we come from a king of Norway? And she just smiled and said, yeah, that part. And then she added, on the wrong side of the sheets. And we both just started laughing because if you know, you know. But she told me her research actually supports it, that there's truth there, even if there are still a lot of dots to connect. She's even been able to trace us back to our great-great-grandfather in a meaningful way. And when you start looking into Norway, you realize something else. It isn't just one king. Norway has had over 60 kings going all the way back to the late 800s. And their history, it's not clean. It's messy. There were co-kings, different regions, shifts in power, different countries involved. So even the exact number depends on how you count it. But here's the part that really hit me. Even if that connection is true, that doesn't make us royalty. It doesn't make us princesses. Because those bloodlines, they didn't stay in castles. They spread. They mixed. They moved across countries, across generations, and eventually they became regular people. People like us. And here's where it gets even crazier. If you go back 1 generation, that's 2 parents. Go back again, 4 grandparents, then 8, 16, 32. It just keeps doubling. So on paper, if you go back far enough, you'd have more ancestors than people who have ever existed. But that's not what actually happens. Because somewhere back there, those lines don't keep spreading out. They start crossing. The same people show up more than once, which means your family tree doesn't just grow, it folds back in on itself. And science backs that up. Because when you strip everything down, we share 99.9% of our DNA. Think about that. Everything we see on the outside, skin tone, features, differences, that's the smallest fraction of who we are. Even something like skin color. It's just melanin. Our bodies adapting over time to where our stories unfolded. Closer to the equator, more protection. Farther away, less needed. And if you believe in God like I do, that's not random. That's design. Different shades, same creator. Different stories, same beginning. So, whether you look at it through history, through ancestry, or through science, you end up in the same place. We overlap. More than we realize, more than we admit, and definitely more than we act like. We don't come from just one place. We come from stories that crossed oceans, fought battles, and then sat down, married, and became something new. People moved, they explored, they traded goods, they fell in love, they built families in places they weren't born into. And over time, everything mixed, everything connected. So maybe 6 degrees isn't just a game. Maybe it's a reflection. Maybe you and I aren't separated by as much as it feels like. Maybe the person you disagree with, the one you don't understand, is closer to your story than you think. And I know, this might sound a little out there, or woo-woo, as they say these days, but stay with me for a second. Some people believe that the connections we feel with others, even complete strangers, aren't random at all. That maybe we've crossed paths before, in another time, another place, another life. Call it reincarnation, call it energy, call it whatever you want. But haven't you ever met someone and it felt like you already knew them? Like the conversation was easy, like there was something familiar you couldn't explain. And even if you don't believe any of that, it still makes you stop and think. What if strangers aren't really strangers at all? Maybe we're not meeting people for the first time. Maybe we're just meeting them again. And that changes something. Because instead of asking, how are we so different? We start asking, what do we actually have in common? Let me find the good in this person. Am I showing love here in this moment? And maybe we didn't drift apart on accident. Maybe we were pulled apart by social media, by constant noise, by being shown over and over again everything that makes us different. It's easier than ever to see what divides us, and harder to see what connects us. But what if we didn't buy into that? Maybe the problem isn't that we're too different. Maybe it's that we forgot we were never that far apart to begin with. Division gets attention. Connection takes effort. What if, in the middle of an argument, instead of trying to win, you remembered this person has a story, and it might not be that far from mine? What if that changed how you spoke, how you listened, how you treated them in that moment? There's always that moment. You meet someone you thought you had nothing in common with, and then one conversation later, you find something. A shared struggle, a similar experience, a feeling you both understand. And just like that, they're not a stranger anymore. I think of when we were kids, growing up in the 70s and 80s, just a few years ago, a lot of times our moms would say, just come home when the streetlights come on. And I did grow up in a smaller town in Minnesota, so we could do that. But I know a lot of you have similar stories. And we might have met several friends that day at the park. I've shared a few videos on Facebook where they talk about if adults could make friends like kids. Back in the day when, you'd see your friend pull up, you'd be like, oh, I like your bike. Oh, I like your skateboard. Oh, let's be friends. Great. And that's all it took. Instant friendship. For our Steffi K thought of the day, we have this. There's a wrought iron gate that I go through regularly, and it's been broken for about 3 months. And it's one where it kind of opens slow. So if you are a car and approaching to enter, it almost seems to move at super slow turtle speed. And if even though the little teeny weeny sign says, 1 car per gate open, you can time it out and about 3 will enter. But if you don't live there and you don't know, so maybe you're an Amazon driver or Uber driver or a friend visiting somebody at that location, you have no idea. So maybe you come across it, but it's already about, the 3rd car time-wise, so it's going to close on you. So cars hit it all the time. So the other day, it was fixed. And within a couple hours, someone had already run into it and broke it. All I could think of was there's definitely a lesson here. Timing is everything. And be patient. People who are patient get through to the other side. It's those that are trying to rush that tend to run into the wrought iron gate. We don't come from just one place. We come from stories. Stories that moved. Stories that blended. Stories that built us. And maybe, if we remembered that, we'd listen a little better, love a little deeper, and realize we were never that far apart to begin with. Thanks for listening to You Stickin' With That. Remember, understanding doesn't happen by accident. It happens when we make space to really hear. New episodes air every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on all major platforms. And one more thing. In episode 15, we talked about Togo. Togo, T-O-G-O. Turn it off, go outside. It's like BOGO, only better, because this one's unlimited. Until next time, let's keep the conversation going and keep listening with heart. And remember, the things we think divide us are often the very things that prove we came from the same story. Have a great week, everybody.